And I'm going to introduce our two presenters for the day and then let them take it away. So our first presenter today is going to be Ashley Edwards. Ashley Edwards is a proud Baltimore City native with a geographical sciences degree from the University of Maryland College Park. During her academic career, she has tailored her studies to all dimensions of sustainability, people, environment, and economics within an urban landscape. She has been involved in the research of University of Maryland's Garden of Reflection and Remembrance and its contribution to restorative justice on the campus community. After obtaining her degree, Ashley sought to serve the public and work on outreach strategies to generate housing for residents in Baltimore and Hartford County regions. She currently works as a liaison between BINIA and the Baltimore City community with the goal of building and engaging a network towards knowledge and utilization of open data. Ashley is our our community engagement specialist here at BINIA. So if you have interacted with our organization, you've probably interacted with her. So excited to hear from her today. And the other person who'll be presenting is Logan Schertz. Logan Schertz is our research analyst, and he is a Baltimore City resident and neighbor of mine and a University of Baltimore alumnus. Logan is a research analyst at BINIA JFI. In addition to conducting geographic analysis for the preparation of the annual Vital Signs report, he completes and assists with custom database and mapping-oriented projects for organizational partners. These projects often range widely in subject and technological requirements, from database design for public agencies to tracking the effective progress of new programs. So welcome both Ashley and Logan, and take it away.
Thank you so much, Amanda, for the wonderful introduction to both me and Logan. And thank you everyone who has joined the call, who is so excited for Data Week. Thank you all for just being a part and being willing to participate today. So like Amanda said, we will be talking about the Baltimore Resource Landscape Survey Analysis today. And we'll be digging into what that means. There's a lot of words. We'll dig into what that means and a lot of the findings that have come out about that. So just to start, I want to start off with a quick introduction to BINIA. So BINIA, Baltimore Neighborhood Indicators Alliance, Jacob France Institute began in 2000 after a 2-year planning process involving several citywide nonprofit organizations and foundations, city government agencies, neighborhoods, etc. In order to create such a large repository of data, they had to convene in that process. So now we constantly produce every year the Vital Signs report, an open data portal that contains over 110 indicators across 8 different topic areas regarding housing, family and health, and things of that nature. BINIA is referred to as a one-stop shop for comprehensive non-partisan data indicators and training. We have multiple projects in various topic areas, like I mentioned before, and we, along with the data within our Vital Signs report, we have been looking at Baltimore communities over a long time. So we have longitudinal data as well. We are also a part of a great organization and a network of partners known as the National Neighborhood Indicators Partnership at Urban Institute. So it contains 30 cities that focus on data democratization. And in this network, we are coordinating between these different cities, trying to share knowledge and share experiences as data intermediary organizations. So I'm just going to run through the show with you guys just to let you know what to expect and how things are going to go. So we're going to start off with the background of the project and mention our partners and how we are defining things. And then we're going to move into how we developed our survey and a lot of our bigger pieces that tied together into our community-based organization landscape survey. We will also be looking at the survey itself and its results. And from the results, we will be pulling out points of exploration. So more so bigger pieces to look forward to if we were to continue this research again, or if there's anyone in the city that would be interested in digging deeper into these findings. These will be the starting points for this conversation about capacity. We will be moving into our first set of questions. So we will have questions about the findings, and that will be our halfway point. And then we will move into our demonstration for our online database, which is also a part of the landscape analysis. And then we move into questions about the database as well. So just to give a little bit of background on the project and why we're even looking at capacity of community-based organizations in the first place. The Mayor's Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement partnered with us to develop a data-driven analysis of community-based organizations that exist in Baltimore City. So why do we want to know this? Well, one, community-based organizations in Baltimore provide such a hub of resources to our residents. So they provide mutual aid, educational programs, supportive services, and other great resources. They understand, so in our understanding of community-based organizations in Baltimore City, it allows us to enhance our knowledge of community connectedness, cohesion, and the distribution of these resources and how we can improve that distribution as well. And here's a little blurb about our partners, the Mayor's Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement. And we thank them for allowing us to, for partnering with us in this process. So in order to start defining capacity or start digging into how we want to analyze capacity, like just from the baseline, we wanted to find definitions of capacity and how that relates to our communities and our community-based organizations. And one thing that speaks to those broadly is this definition by R.J. Chaskins, which mentions community capacity is the integration of human, organizational, social capital, and social capital existing within a given community that can be leveraged to solve collective problems, improve or maintain the well-being of a given community. So from that definition, we were able to pull certain pieces apart and see, hey, so this directly speaks to community capacity. So let's see how this relates to, or what things we can pull out of that make up that ecosystem of that community that can relate to community-based organizations. So the things that are those variables, those organizational variables that come out of that are the goals, the community involvement, technology, funding, performance. These are bigger variables that we would like to look at deeper and define the capacity for those. So as we move into trying to create or as we try to move into creating and outlining more of the research design, we created a database, an internal database where we combine records from 8 data repositories that have administrative location data for organizations across Baltimore City. So starting off, they begin with Data Axle, which is a Info USA tax business data for Baltimore nonprofits, Charm Care, which is community health access and resource module, which is the community health access and resource module. We have the community association directory, which is provided by the Baltimore Department of Planning, where community-based organizations can self-report their locations, their service types, and any other coordinating information that would help them be easily discoverable. Then we have lists that were generated from offices affiliated with city government operations, such as a neighborhood list backed by the geography of city council members or city council districts. And then we have the Rocker resource list. And then we have a few other lists as well. So moving into the design or continuing the design of our survey and the design of how we are trying to think about the organizations that we have and that we've pulled from the results in our database. We created a list. Monty and Binya together created a list of different service types that these organizations could identify. Some of these were already included or already self-reported in a lot of the data that we got from the data repositories. Other things were filled in given the survey. And we'll talk about that a little bit and as we move into more methods. So in order to develop the survey or develop some of the survey questions, we took those service types. We took a lot of the information that we pulled together from the data repositories. We pulled information from our literature review process where we were defining capacity and putting together, pulling out some questions. So things that we would like to know, if we were an organization trying to coordinate with another organization, things that we would want to know if we were just a city entity, which our partner is. So it was helpful to separate these things out in 3 different sections, given the things that we found in the literature review. So the survey that we designed was divided into 3 different components, and we found them to be organizational information, collaboration and engagement, productivity and performance, and all 3 of those will again have their own sections and are delineated into their own definitions of capacity. Alongside developing developing the survey, we held a focus meetings with community stakeholders, and those were there were 2 that we held, and we wanted to gain some feedback on the survey pieces that we had, the pieces about the database, so making sure we had enough information to be locating other organizations, or if there was anything that they suggested that we could provide or include, and to just overall review our way of thinking about capacity. So moving into the survey dissemination, this was the big part where we are banding together and trying to get the survey out there. As we see, the Baltimore Resource Landscape Survey was launched on the 16th of March, and it remained open until May 5th. So that was about a 2-month process. And then we, in order to do this, we did different forms of outreach. So we did over 1,400, almost 1,500 emails were sent. There were over 200 calls that were made, resulting in 50 additional survey responses. We have flyers that were circulated along with the survey that we have included here. And they included a QR code, so it will be easy transmission for people to fill out the survey. And the survey was the survey and the flyers were advertised on various different social media channels. And here's also a brief screenshot of the survey and what it looked like. So given that and given the survey dissemination, this map on the right shows us the distribution of survey responses that we got. So we're moving slightly into the findings, but this just kind of lays out who we received responses from. So the highest concentration of respondents is found within districts 11, 12, and 7. So those all make up the central parts of the city. And as you see from our legend and just in the map itself, the districts with the fewer survey responses extend to the city's northern and southern boundaries. So it's almost like a ring. We have like our central areas, our central districts being heavily reflected in the survey, and then you have a ring outside where that response rate decreases. So that is one part or one way to visualize our survey responses, but we will also dig into different ways that we will be visualizing them. So digging into the findings in our first section of the survey and our first section of analysis, I want to say, we asked questions regarding an organization's just general information. So where are you located? how are you do you define yourself as a nonprofit, things of that nature. And these are points that we want to highlight. So 73% of survey respondents identified their organization structure as a nonprofit organization, which is big because it points to a few things. It points to, one, a lot of nonprofits, or all nonprofits in the state of Maryland, have to are if they're labeled as nonprofits, then they have that they have a different financial component and assumption with them as well. So they have their tax, they're incorporated, they're represented by tax the they're represented by tax corporations and things like that. So then we asked were volunteer sorry. Then we asked about, we still asked about the structure, but we started to see that volunteer-based organizations were the second most represented organization type in the survey responses, with 16 submissions. And again, to further highlight the idea of a lot of our organizations, or responding organizations, representing nonprofits, we asked, does the organization have bylaws? And 85% and or 102 respondents responded yes. So that further confirms the identity of nonprofits of some of these responding organizations, because because nonprofits that are recognized, they have to have bylaws as well. So continuing with the organizational information, and continuing the conversation about the service types that we mentioned that we were convening with our partners with to decide and make a list for, we found that when selecting and when asking and respondents selecting their primary service type, 28 respondents selected community associations. So that was the most selected. That was the most selected service response or service type that we received in the survey. So that was interesting that we found. And there was 16 organizations that selected other to describe their primary means of service. So this graph that you guys see, that's basically showing the breakdown and the amount of selected service types. This is not all the service types, but these are the ones that got the most selections. There are some that didn't receive any selections. So for the organizations to self-identify or to choose the other selection, to choose the other selection indicates that they're willing to self-identify, and maybe they're the way that they're deploying their services and resources is pretty diverse and doesn't fit under the one or two umbrellas that we provided for them. So moving into our second section of the survey, we talked about collaboration and engagement. So we asked organizations about their who they frequently collaborated with, and who they did they belong to coalitions, or did they belong to partnerships. And of all the 119 respondents, 69 organizations, 58%, stated that they are members of partnerships or coalitions. 67 organizations manually entered the names of these partnerships in the surveys. So we have a list of, and we've included in our report, of all of the different coalitions, partnerships, bigger networks that organizations feel like they belong to. And we see in this graph right here, there's a number of, it's showing the number of coalitions or partnerships that the number that they stated they collaborated with, and the number of organizations who have that corresponding number of coalitions. So there's a lot of organizations that only belong to one, or knowingly belong to one coalition or partnership, and that seems to decrease as we go into the higher amounts or higher numbers of coordinating coalitions. So to continue on or actually we're moving into the productivity and performance, which is the third section of the survey and of our analysis findings. So one of the biggest pieces that we asked, or one of the biggest questions that we asked was about funding, because funding, the money controls a lot of things that these organizations can do and poses a lot of restraints or brings more optimism. So one thing that we asked were the types of funding sources that organizations had or that they received. So as we went through the process, or as we went through asking these questions and getting responses for them, we saw that the fundraising and donation response was selected 69 times, and public grants was chosen 66 times. And that as we were analyzing this, we separated out, we saw that community-based organizations with 3 or more funding sources still mirrored the results for that amount of CBOs coordinating with that amount of CBOs receiving funding. That also coordinates with the CBOs with 2 funding sources or less. So we have 25 responses that also received the highest amount of funding sources that were selected were funding, donation, and public grants. And only 7 respondents selected fundraising and donations as their primary source of funding. So moving on, still with productivity and performance, we asked about funding, and we asked about trainings as well. So trainings give indication of expertise, learning and expertise, and gaining more knowledge and the organization's well-being, and to continue their goals for their primary service. So this was an important question. And when we asked this, what type of trainings have members of organizations participated in in the past 12 months, we provided a general list of different types of trainings. And these consist of technology demonstrations. They consist of professional development, team building, and then we also offered a selection of none. So organizations can clearly mentioned that they either did or did not to participate in training in the last year. 24 organizations mentioned that they did not take part in any trainings or activities in the past year. And that could be reflexive of many things, given we are still in a transition out, and last year we were still in a transition out of COVID. So that could be, that could explain that as well. However, there were 94 organizations out of our responding organizations mentioning that they participated in some sort of training. So again, going back to the money and funding, we asked about the revenue ranges for organizations, and we kind of listed them out from lowest to highest. And what we saw was it was very pulled apart. So we saw that the highest revenue range, which was $1 million plus for an organization, was selected 33 times, or selected by 33 respondents. That was the highest revenue range, and that was the highest selected revenue range as well. The lowest revenue range, which was 0 to 25,000, was selected by 31 respondents, and that was the second highest revenue range. So there's this stark dichotomy between organizations that are receiving a lot more funding, that are receiving a lot of funding, and then a lot of organizations that are receiving a low amount of funding. So that, and as we talk about, go into our points of exploration, we'll see that there will be some recommendations, and there will be some more areas to explore why this is, or create more data pieces to understand why, if this is consistent for the entirety of the city. So we have, like I mentioned, we have points of exploration. So we're digging into some of the key findings that we mentioned previously in the coming out of the survey. So one thing that we saw when we were reviewing our when we were reviewing our collaboration and partnerships section, we were seeing that there was a call for communities and connectivity. So we saw that university partnerships had a significant impact on, or had a significant correlation rather, to the annual revenue ranges of organizations. So when an organization does coordinates and has a I want to say a connection or a network with a university, they tend to have higher revenue ranges than those with smaller budgets. Universities, from what we're seeing, universities are in a good enough position to enhance engagement and partnership with surrounding communities. So in order to explain this graphic a little bit, the percentages of organizations and revenue ranges and revenue range reportings are on the right. So we have the different percentages of organizations that just mention that they or that it was just a different set of organizations that are coordinating with the colleges and universities, and that's the percentage. And then we have the annual revenue ranges, which lets you know that the more they coordinate with them, the more money you are receiving. So that trend did not necessarily persist for the networks of coalitions between community organizations and other government organizations. So we saw that there was just we saw that there was just like a scramble, or like I want to say there's just not that much of a strong trend of connections between these types of networks as is the connections between universities and community organizations. So going, still speaking to that point of communities and connectivity, we did point out and create a map for lack of local partnerships. So there were organizations that did identify that they did not coordinate with any government organizations or any government agencies or any other community agencies. I mean, any other community organizations. And given what we see, we understand that a lot of this data is somewhat limited because this does not represent all of organizations in Baltimore City, but there may be some opportunity for city offices to develop some engagement strategies with these organizations that mention that they are not communicating with other service organizations around them or just in general. So another point of exploration that we want to highlight and go into is the for community associations. So going back into the money, following the money, and seeing where a lot of the revenue is. 70% of community associations fall into the annual revenue range of 0 to 25. That 25,000. And that makes sense because a lot of community associations are a lot of them are either volunteer based, or it's just there's not enough money for overhead to pay people to for like consistent employment and things of that nature. This is so a lot of things that the funding is going off of or going towards is primarily it's small. It's a small amount because it's just for a community association. And the outliers in annual revenue offer a potential opportunity for external support. So although like there is some expectation for a smaller revenue range. That does not mean that this revenue range fits for every organization in every small community association in every neighborhood. So there may be room for outliers in the annual revenue reporting to provide external support or receive external support. And developing the financial capacity of nonprofit institutions may require training, learning materials for knowledge around compliance and reporting. So one big thing that we would recommend coming out of this introductory conversation of capacity in Baltimore City organizations is creating a central and accessible repository of targeted learning materials around this theme of just gaining and enhancing of gaining knowledge, and that will in turn enhance capacity. So again, digging into our community associations, 53% of these organizations meet 9 to 12 times a year. So that is monthly, or with a drop off of maybe 2 months given a summertime break. But that shows how frequently community organizations or community associations are meeting and coordinating with organizations. And they have the capabilities. We've also asked them, how are you communicating, or how are you convening or holding events for organizations? And there was still a high amount in community associations that met either did virtual or in person, and did a combination of both. And that was about 90% of responding community associations. So digging still into community associations, they may be useful for communicating timely information given the frequency of these meetings, given the availability and the close proximity they are to residents. They could be the hubs, given their locations or what have you. They could be the hubs for disseminating timely information and timely resources. And community associations do not meet at one type of venue. We also asked about where just all of our organizations, our responding organizations, where are they meeting? And there was mention to a wider range of different meeting spaces, given libraries, churches, etc. So given the growing focus on providing wraparound services, meetings occurring in public buildings, such as libraries, precincts, recreations, and senior centers, they may provide an opportunity for enhanced outreach and engagement. So that was the final point of exploration that I want to dig into, given our findings. And I want to move into questions given the findings before we go into our survey, our online database demonstration. So is there any questions? All right, so I'm seeing a lot of things in the chat. Oh, I'm seeing introductory things. Okay. That slide map. So Molly Finch said, for the last slide map, what does the large purple dot next to District 8 represent? So let me go back. So that large dot there, and I'm sorry for not fully explaining the visual of this, but this right here explains the funding level, the community association funding level, and that is the largest out of the or the highest out of the funding levels that we've seen. So that's 2,500,000 to 500,000, and that's existing only in District 8, given the the responding community associations. Okay, so I see Python data for the map to make the map. We will go into development of the map soon. And then but it was created in ArcGIS. For clarity, does the funding and okay, I see a question that says, for clarity, does the funding disparity mean underfunded? No, I feel it means that we can't draw that conclusion because there's a lot of, well, we don't have a full representation of community-based organizations in the city. So it means that, and so in that cohesion and that like compilation of organizations, it's hard to say if it is underfunded or if it is or if it isn't, because there's a lot of location implications with that. So that's just showing that it's just low, or that's just the lowest of the funding ranges. And just to give context to those funding ranges, they were provided, or they were taken by or referenced by the Maryland nonprofit funding ranges, because they have different, they have due reporting on various fundings for nonprofit organizations.
I just want to briefly piggyback on what Ashley was saying in regards to what we see in the funding levels on the community associations.
Oops, sorry.
No, it's fine. So what we saw is we had about 33 respondents in that community association range. A majority fall in that 0 to 25%. That completely makes total sense. Community associations are really small. They might not have staff. They might not have a ton of overhead. So what we're not really seeing is a huge disparity, but when we do have community organizations that fall outside of that funding range, those are the institutions who we might be able to target for more assistance, more services. So I think a really good example of this might be a community association that gets a grant, maybe from a group like the Chesapeake Bay Trust or something very project oriented, where they suddenly need to manage a lot of money in a way that they haven't before. So sort of looking at these funding levels can kind of point to, oh, maybe there was really rapid growth over time. And that's sort of what I think this image does a really good job of displaying.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Amanda. And not to take too much time, I wanted to quickly move into the demonstration, because I know that we're running a little bit over time. So I'm going to transition and pass things over to Logan Schertz.
Thank you, Ashley. I will go ahead and get my screen shared now. I dropped a link in the chat to the online tool for you all to play along with if you want. Is everybody able to see my screen? I see some nodding, so I will proceed. So we have the online tool here. On the left-hand side is a list of filters that you can filter the data by to get a clearer picture of what you're trying to find. On the right-hand side, we have two indicators, one that is responsive to the map and filters to see how many you have selected, and one with the total amount that we have location information for. And lastly, in the bottom right-hand corner, we have the organization details for each record, as well as some information on this database and the project as a whole. So I will go ahead and do some hypothetical situations that you may find yourself in for how to go ahead and use this tool. So let's say that you just moved to Baltimore City and you want to become more connected with your community, with your neighborhood, and you're not sure where exactly to do that. You can go up to the select an organization type and choose community associations. As Ashley said, this was the highest number of respondents that the organization had in this type. And if we go ahead and select a neighborhood, let's say that we move to Frankfurt. If I go ahead and search Frankfurt, it will zoom to that neighborhood, and we can see that we have three responses right here. We have the Cydonia Community Association, the Frankfurt Improvement Association, and the Gardenville Neighborhood Association. Each of these, I think, would be fair game for our hypothetical new resident to reach out to, maybe all three, depending on where their boundaries are. But he's very well covered in this neighborhood, it seems. Now let's try a different neighborhood. Let's say we're still a new resident, but we want to move to the west side. We want to move to Mondawmin. We can see that there are two community associations that are nearby. We have the Greater Mondawmin Coordinating Council, and we have the new Auchintrolli Terrace Association. Provided he can pronounce that, he can give them a call and attend the next meeting, given that they have it listed here at the bottom of the record. Each of these records for these organizations will have the contact information for the organization or their leader, as well as a physical address if they maintain one, and a mailing address if they have one of those as well. You will also be able to see if they have meetings, what format those are in, whether they're virtual or in person, how often they maintain those meetings, and where those meetings are held. Now to try some other hypothetical situations, let's say that I run a youth program in the city, and I want to make sure that I either don't copy another program near me, so I need to coordinate with them and reach out, or I want to make sure I'm operating in a different part of the city than whoever is doing something already. Under organization type, we can search up youth. We get youth organizations, and we get a list and the locations of all the youth organizations that responded to our survey. Some of them including Soccer Without Borders, Sisters Saving the City, Mission Fit. So you could coordinate with these organizations and see what programs they are having on weekends and after school. Another example that we could have is if you want to reach out to those organizations Ashley was talking about that have disparate funding levels. If we wanted to dig into that a bit more and see, what was that organization that had the highest over there on the west side. So let's see if we have community associations and we want the highest funding level that we saw, which was right here. We'll see that that is the Gwynns Falls Community Association that had the largest funding level. And here's the email address and the phone number to reach out to them accordingly, as well as their collaborators. One other thing I wanted to point out about this tool is that aside from the filters, there's other layers on the map that can be used. If you click this stacked pages button right here, this is the layers that you can use. This is our current layer right here, but we can turn that off and we can see all of the locations of Baltimore City Public Schools, as well as Baltimore City operated recreation centers, and a heat map of the responses to our survey, so we can really see how pronounced some of that responses were. Are there any questions about the tool? I really like to do a couple of runs for you guys. If there's anything that's interesting to you that you'd want me to take a look at, if you're interested in a specific neighborhood or a specific type of organization. Let's see. So the neighborhood filter is the city's neighborhood statistical level boundaries. So they are not the same as BNIA CSAs. However, the BNIA CSA layer is in that layers tab I was showing earlier. It's right here. And so you can still see which ones are in which CSA, but it is not a filter on this tool, as this was made for the mayor's office. And how do we, how do we ensure that the contact information is up to date with the organizations? We used the best information that we were able to find data-wise, that being many of the city's data sets. As Ashley mentioned, the community association directory is a self-maintained, input data set where organizations are asked to input that information on an annual basis. So a lot of this is on the organizations themselves to be inputting some of this information. And that is something to note when doing these analyses.
So do you have a view that shows the connections? You know, they said some organizations coordinate with other organizations.
So that is a more difficult thing to show on an interactive map like this. We had a couple of those static maps that Ashley showed earlier that included some of those spatial analyses. But what we have is we have the partner coalitions filter right here. So you can choose if you know a specific coalition that you want to look for. You can see which ones are included in that. We have Digital Equity Coalition. Let's see, some of these they included. It was a large text field, so they are distinct a lot of the time. But we do have a measure on just a binary on if they are or are not a coalition member. And many of them, 67 of the ones with addresses were. Does the tool include the community associations from the community association directory? Yes, it does. Not all of them would be included in this view right here. There are two different versions of this tool, and that's just because of permissions of what we are able to publish out to everyone or not. Currently, all we have on this tool is the surveys that we conducted ourselves, because in conducting that survey, those organizations consented to having this information published. We're not able to publish data sets that are third party in that nature at the moment. That may be something that is able to be seen later on, but for right now, just the privacy reasons, we can't publish all records that we have. But I will say the mayor's office has a much larger version of this data set that was turned over to them with, I believe, just under 6,000 records. And many of those just being sourced from places where we can't publish it publicly in this way. And Molly asked, can I share more about the crime data layers included under the layer tool? So they were really an ask from the Mayor's Office of Neighborhood Safety themselves. They wanted to be able to easily see the rates of certain crime rates, property crime, violent crime, arrests, and see if there was a visual correlation with some of these organizations having disparate, partnership levels, disparate funding levels, and just to explore those relationships further. That was really why we included it. I didn't mention it as a piece of this training just because it's something that I think is found also on our main website, but it's included here just for ease of use. And I will say those crime metrics, aside from the Baltimore City arrest data, are our own metrics that we produce for the vital signs, our annual vital signs report. And Jennifer asks about the maintenance schedule for this tool. Now, this tool was made as part of the Baltimore neighborhood, I'm sorry, the Baltimore Landscape Resource Survey work. That project has come to an end. This is a tool that could be updated in the future. However, there are not plans on our end to do so. It has been turned over to the Mayor's Office of Neighborhood Safety, and it's their project to do with as they will. and that however they deem feasible in the future. It's certainly something that could be easily updated annually, with linking to our data and their own data. Absolutely, Jennifer. Any other questions or hypothetical situations that you would want to see used in the tool before we leave? All right, hearing none, I will turn it back over to Ashley and Amanda.
Thank you so much for joining us today, and I hope you enjoyed that presentation. Our inboxes are open if questions come up or emerge following this. We'd love to hear from you, love to hear your thoughts. I think there's some great questions and comments in the chat, and I think that question about seeing the sort of network of partnerships is a really interesting opportunity for someone who's interested in or engaged in network mapping or sort of thinking about the relationships between different organizations. My favorite part about this project is it's a first step at really measuring how our neighborhood and community-based organizations are operating, what constraints they operate on, under, and who they're working with. So this is just a first step at measuring capacity. And I'm really excited that we had an opportunity to share that to you. Briefly, Megan Hazer asked a question about how this relates to Charm Care. I believe Charm Care was included in the database that we used to sort of compile our list of initial community organizations when we created this. That's correct?
Yes.
Yeah, so Charm Care won't be included on this online tool due to the privacy restrictions, but it is included in the overall project metrics.
Fantastic. So if there are no more questions, I want to thank you all for joining us today for this first Lunch and Learn. As we mentioned earlier, there are 3 more coming up this week, and we hope you will join us. Cheryl just posted a link in the chat so that you can register for those if you haven't already. And then finally, and we're going to email you with this link, but the easiest thing to do is just do it right now, is please submit an evaluation of this presentation. These evaluations are super important for our organization to track participation, to understand where our audience is coming from, and as we report back on Data Week and improve it in the future. So please, 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 please fill out that evaluation form. Do it now, and then you won't have to think about it ever again. So thank you so much for joining us. I hope you are joining us tomorrow afternoon for Cheryl's presentation on mapping in your neighborhood. And if there's nothing else, everyone have a great Monday. Thank you, everyone. Have a good rest of your day.